When you look at the history of South Asia, there are a few names that really stir up a lot of debate. And Tipu Sultan, the 18th century ruler of Mysore, he's right at the top of that list. His story is just this whirlwind of genius, brutal warfare, and fierce resistance. So yeah, let's get into this.
And this really gets to the heart of the matter. It's the one question about him that splits historians, politicians, and just about everyone else right down the middle, even today. Was Tipu Sultan a heroic freedom fighter who stood up to the British, or was he a brutal religious tyrant? So, you've got these two completely different pictures of the same guy. On one side, he's seen as this forward-thinking visionary, a hero who fought tooth and nail against British colonialism. But on the other side, he's remembered as a ruthless conqueror who forced his religion on people. We're going to look at the evidence for both sides of that coin.
All right, so to really get who this guy was, we've got to go back to the beginning. That famous nickname, the Tiger of Mysore. That wasn't just for show. It was basically his whole life's mission. His entire upbringing was crafted to create a new kind of Indian ruler, one who could take on a totally new kind of enemy. So Tipu was born back in 1751. His dad was Hyder Ali, a total military mastermind who'd actually seized power in Mysore. And here's the thing, his father couldn't read or write, but he made absolutely sure Tipu got a world-class education. He was fluent in a bunch of languages, and maybe most importantly, he started training in modern military strategy with French officers when he was just 15. By 17, he wasn't just some prince sitting in a palace. He was out there leading armies and handling diplomacy.
So when Tipu finally becomes Sultan in 1782, he doesn't just sit back and enjoy the throne. Nope. He hits the ground running, looking to transform everything. His reign was this incredible period of innovation in government, the economy, and famously in military tech.
And what's just fascinating here is how much he did. This guy wasn't just a warrior, he was a real state builder. He rolled out a new system for collecting land taxes to fill up the treasury, created a whole new calendar and new coins, and totally reorganized his government. He even kickstarted the famous Mysore silk industry by sending people to Bengal to learn their techniques.
But out of all his innovations, one really stands out, especially when it comes to war. I mean, you've got Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, a brilliant rocket scientist long before he was president of India, calling Tipu the innovator of the world's first war rocket. And believe me, that is not just hype. Yeah, we're not talking about your average firecrackers here. Tipu's rockets were something else entirely. They were iron-cased, packed with gunpowder, and could fly for up to 2 kilometers. They would terrorize enemy soldiers. When the British first came up against these things, they had no idea what hit them. In fact, they later captured this technology, copied it, and used it themselves in the Napoleonic Wars.
And man, did he need that military edge. Because if there's one thing that defined his entire rule, it was this constant, brutal fight against the expanding power of the British East India Company.
Just look at this timeline. It's basically a story of non-stop war. He becomes ruler right in the middle of one, and then fights 2 more huge ones against the British. And that defeat in 1792, wow. He lost half his kingdom and had to give up 2 of his own young sons as hostages. But even then, he refused to give in. He just spent the next 7 years getting ready for one last showdown.
You know, what's really smart is that Tipu got that this wasn't just some local skirmish. He saw the big picture. He was one of the first Indian rulers to think globally. He sent diplomats all the way to the Ottoman Empire and even to France, trying to build this huge anti-British alliance. He was even writing to Napoleon Bonaparte, trying to get a joint attack going.
Okay, but this is where the picture of the anti-colonial hero gets, well, really messy. Because to build his powerful kingdom, Tipu was also a conqueror. And the way he treated the people in the lands he took over, that's where the darkest part of his story comes from. And nothing makes this clearer than his own words. In a letter talking about his campaign in the Kodagu region, this is what he wrote about the people he captured. It's evidence like this, coming straight from him, that fuels the argument that his wars weren't just about politics. For him, they were also about religion. And the number he gives in that same letter? 40,000. He claims he captured and forcibly converted 40,000 Kodavas. And you hear similar, brutal stories from his campaigns in Malabar and Mangalore, stories of massacres and the destruction of temples and churches. So for those communities, he's absolutely not a hero. He's remembered as a ruthless persecutor.
But then, and this is what makes him so complicated, you have this complete contradiction. While all that was happening in conquered lands,
Back in his own established kingdom, Tipu was a huge patron of Hindu institutions. He gave money to more than 150 temples. When a famous Hindu temple was attacked by another army, Tipu himself paid to have it rebuilt. His own treasurer was a Hindu. It just doesn't seem to add up, right?
So all of this, the innovation, the wars, the brutality, the patronage, it all comes to a head in a really dramatic final act. By 1799, the British had had enough. They decided the Tiger of Mysore was just too big a threat to let live, and they were going to finish him once and for all.
And they weren't taking any chances. The odds against him were just staggering. The British teamed up with their allies, the Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad, to create this massive army of over 60,000. Tipu had maybe 30,000 soldiers. He was outnumbered 2-1. And as if that wasn't bad enough, some of his own top ministers betrayed him, weakening the city's defenses and feeding intel to the British. So the enemy is literally breaking through the walls of his capital city. His French advisors are begging him, hey, there's a secret way out, you can escape and fight another day. But his answer? It's become legendary and just sums him up perfectly. Better to live one day as a tiger than 1,000 years as a sheep.
And that's exactly what he did. He jumped right into the thick of the battle and was killed, fighting hand-to-hand at one of the gates to his fort. Back in Britain, they actually declared a public holiday to celebrate his death. I mean, that alone tells you everything you need to know about how much they feared him.
Which brings us right back to where we started. After he died, his kingdom was torn apart. But the fight over who he was, that was just getting started. So how are we supposed to remember a guy like this? A man of such deep and frankly confusing contradictions. So you look at the evidence, the case for freedom fighter, it's his relentless, lifelong fight against the British, his incredible innovations, those game-changing rockets. The case for religious tyrant? Well, it's built on those horrific accounts from the lands he conquered, often backed up by his own letters using the language of holy war. He was a product of his time, a complex ruler driven by a mix of ambition, politics, and faith. And how much weight you give to each of those things? Well, that's why we're still talking about him today.
Tipu's story is just one of these incredible, complex histories from the region. If you want to go deeper on stuff like this, you should definitely check out our South Asian history playlist. And hey, why not subscribe to Notebook Summaries while you're at it?
And I'll leave you with this question to chew on. Can someone be a hero and a villain at the same time? Is it possible to celebrate a figure for fighting a foreign empire while also condemning them for their brutality towards others? How we answer that question says as much about us today as it does about the Tiger of Mysore.